In making work, artists might paint, draw, sculpt, make photographs, films, write, or all of the above. In comparison to that, what does it look like or mean when an artist focuses all their energies towards working exclusively with a single material for a sustained period of time? Commonly used in foundational drawing classes or for preparatory sketches, charcoal is a material that many artists would be familiar with. When drawing with charcoal, one is able to achieve both soft, light strokes or harsh graphic lines. Charcoal is also a rather soft material. It crumbles. When a sketch is complete, it is often finished off with a fixative to ensure that everything stays in place. This episode features a conversation with the artist Mahalakshmi Kannappan. Maha's practice is centered around the use of charcoal. Instead of using charcoal in the context of drawing, Maha creates three-dimensional canvases and sculptures that accentuate and amplify the material's texture, malleability, and tones.
So there's so much you can actually find when you look under the surface. Okay, so I'm a person who always want to dig deeper. So looking at the cracks and the crevices, people always look at them as deformities. But I look at them as opportunities to discover more.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Mushroomed, a podcast hosted by the Singapore-based online platform Object Lessons Space. My name is Joella. I'm the founding editor of the platform and your host for this podcast. Mahalakshmi Kannappan, or Maha, has worked her magic with charcoal for a while now. She is known for these large, wall-hung, three-dimensional charcoal canvases. She presented a series of these canvases at a recent solo exhibition of hers. The solo exhibition, titled Singular Moments, was a tour de force performance in charcoal manipulation and materiality. One of these canvases, titled The Crevice 1, exemplifies this. The work is dominated by an even layer of charcoal. However, this smooth surface ruptures towards the bottom third of the canvas. A horizontal rift emerges as the artist pries the two sides away from one another. Beneath, sheaths of charcoal layers are laid bare. As you crane your head to look closer or take in the work from different perspectives, it begins to reveal itself to you. Maha has consistently showcased her mastery over charcoal as a medium by way of these canvases. Alongside these canvases, Maha also presented a new development in her artistic journey. The artist exhibited a series of 4 freestanding charcoal sculptures. These sculptures were placed in the middle of the exhibition space, allowing viewers to circumambulate the plinths upon which they were placed. Almost in contrast to the horizontality of the Crevice 1, the freestanding sculpture Shreds 2 emphasizes verticality. Shreds 2 stands upright on its plinth, but leans a little to the side, almost toppling over, yet still remaining in balance. The sculpture, when viewed from the front, gives the impression of a monolithic, unwrinkled whole. Yet on its side, the sculpture gives way to vertical planes of charcoal. They run down the entire height of the sculpture, akin to pages in a book or layers in a milk crepe. For this episode, we speak to the artist about her enduring relationship with charcoal and how she handles such a tactile and sensuous medium. I wanted to begin our conversation by taking some time to speak to the networks that were embedded within. I wanted to get a sense of what you would say your earliest or even your most formative experience with art was.
Okay, so actually, I was born and brought up in India. So most of you must have not heard about it. It's a very small cosmopolitan city, and I came from a middle class family, emphasizing on academic excellence all the time. So for me, art was never formal. I never went to art school, formal art school, because there was no formal art school around me. Although I have huge interest in art, so that's how it was, and so there was no opportunity for me to pursue. You see, so I used to do occasional sketches here and there. Whenever I'm with my friends, or we have a art group, and we just do occasional sketches. Then life goes on. Then I started work. There was pressure to earn, and but I chose a career where I made sure that I do something within the art sector. Yeah, so that's how my art involvement before. But following that, I rekindled my art involvement when I relocated to Singapore.
Mm, I think within your artworks, there's a very clear relationship between the way in which you work and the material that you work in as well.
Mm-hmm.
Charcoal in particular as something that features so prominently across all of your works. And although it's often associated with drawing and sketching, you use it to these really amazing, great sculptural effects. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe you could also tell us a little bit more about what drew you towards working with charcoal and what you enjoy most about working with this material as well.
Yeah, okay. So since young, right, I used to draw. Even though I don't have a formal education, but I always draw. And the ready, an affordable material that I could always use was pencil and charcoal sticks. Those days, I always use these when I go outdoor sketching. I use charcoal a lot because it gives me, the depth that I wanted. With one single material, I can actually bring out everything that I actually want to bring in that art. So that was the interesting thing about charcoal. That that's how I always kind of attracted to charcoal. And also it's easy. You see, you can carry only one single material wherever you go, and you can just quickly sketch. There was one thing particularly about that. But as part of a course, right, in NAFA, there was this module called material exploration. So that was the time when charcoal, immediately came. That was the first thing that came to my mind. Mm, so the rawness, the monotone nature really attracted me. That's how I kind of drew towards, uh, yeah, charcoal.
Yeah, I was wondering, throughout your time at NAFA, whether or not you might have been taught by or came into contact with Tang Ling Na, the charcoal artist who works a
Yes,
lot.
yes,
Yeah, so I was
yeah.
thinking a lot about if you had crossed paths with her and even that she might have had an impact on the way in which you work with or think about charcoal as well.
Actually, I wish I had met her before, but I couldn't actually, because there was a couple of times where there was a workshop with her, but I had to miss, because of my family commitments. So, but then later I came to know that she is also using charcoal. There was one workshop where I regret for missing that workshop with her. It was the one in the gallery. She used to sketch on the paper that is on the floor, and people crawling with the charcoal powder on themselves and on the paper. It was quite
Mm,
fascinating, but I missed it. But I met her during C Focus
mm,
last year. Yeah, it was quite we had a quite interesting conversation. Yes.
Now that you mentioned C focus, it's probably a good
Mm.
time for us to talk about some of the works that were presented there as well. I think, for
Yes.
example, works that you've made, you really do get the sense that a single moment is crystallized in charcoal. And
Mhm.
it strikes me that the process of making or carving out your works must be quite long and laborious, even. So I was wondering if
Yeah.
you could walk us through some of your working processes. How much time do you spend developing a work, and how does experimentation and play figure within that process?
Yes, that's quite an interesting, and people always ask me about this particular question. They want to know more about the process. How do I do it? How do I do it? Yeah. Okay. So here I can tell you. Usually my works take 2 months.
Mm,
From from design to layout to final outcome. Yeah. So initially, my works I used to do it on a canvas base. Then slowly I had to move to a wooden base because the works got heavier and larger also. So I usually prepare the base, and by the side I prepare my charcoal layers, and this will take at least 1 week to do the preparations, like the basic ones. Then after that I start the charcoal layers, to mix them on, or to lay them on the base, the wooden base. So that's how I start. And for the, like, the sourcing, right, actually, uh, before I used to buy, before, in the sense, like couple of years before, when I started off with this as my final year project in NAFA, those days I used to grind the barbecue charcoal
mm,
myself. Yeah, I used to do that. And you can actually see at my home there's a full showcase of damaged grinders. Yeah, so I used to do that. And now, then I fortunately found a source from India. When I traveled to India, I kind of got this powder in bulk from there. So that's how it goes. uh, and Yeah. So the interesting fact about charcoal, right, is you will never know what the results are. Okay, so because when I started exploring it with combining with other elements, I kind of always get different results every time. Once it's when it's wet, it's a different result, and when it's dry, it's totally a different one. I kind of I like the unpredictability, and the uncontrollable, because it's never in my control, right? The results are never in my control. So these things always fascinate me. But over the time, when I started exploring, when I understood that I can actually control the composition underlying, the base. Like I said, canvas to wooden, I changed it to that. The weather, if it's really sunny, the effects are quite different. The drying time differs, and the effects are quite different. And if it's rainy, then I had to do a few things to really, not like, the moisture. Too much moisture is also a problem, so I have to control the weather. So I have to put it in an aircon room. I have to shift from indoors to outdoors, or outdoors to indoors, all these things. So, and also the proposition of the mixture, you see, these things actually have an impact on the output. So when I understood these things, actually I try to manipulate the composition and the layout, and yet I cannot have an 100% predictable layout, predictable output, you see. So there's still this level of unpredictability remains. Okay, that's
mm.
what I think keeps. I mean, that's why I have a happy relationship with charcoal. I guess that's the only thing that is still having me, like, inspiring me every time.
Yeah, there's this, it sounds like there's this push and pull between yourself and how you work with the material. But
Yes.
even with this layer of unpredictability, like you say, I still
Mm,
do feel like, there's this really clear and visual formal language to your
mm,
recent works. And in particular, I'm thinking about, the works you presented at Gajah Gallery last year for your solo exhibition, Singular
yeah,
Moments. What would
yeah.
you say the significance of layers, crevices, and texture is to you? And I mean this both on a conceptual and visual level as well.
Yes, yes. Yeah. So there's so much you can actually find when you look under the surface. Okay. So I'm a person who always want to dig deeper. I don't want to skim through stuff and just leave it. I mean, take decisions on the first sight or things like that. So I think this applies to my material as well. The materials that I work with. You will never get the results which you thought. I mean, you can get the results that you never thought is possible. Hmm. So looking at the cracks and the crevices, people always look at them as deformities, right? But I look at them as opportunities to discover more. So that's the reason why you have cracks here and there all the time, because I want to see what is underneath, what is, what there is always something behind the scenes, things like that. But on a visual level, right, where do I take these visual ideas from? There was always people ask me, how do you, why do you want to have a crack in the middle, or how do you get these visuals? So for this singular moment, actually, I had one story. It's like a childhood memory that had an impact always on me. A boy scratching in the parked cars. Okay, I've always had this thought coming, flashing in my mind all the time. The marks that left on the car and the impact. The boy who made the mark actually is no longer there in that moment. When the owners are there. Things like this. So I always wanted to reflect this in my work. So that's how the visuals actually come in. Like, you can see the scratch in the center, like when you see my works in the singular moment series, actually there is one crack going through all the way, from the first piece to almost the fourth piece.
Hmm.
So yeah, so this is how I play with the conceptual level, and also on a visual level.
Yeah, I think, there's this real continuity, like you say, not just with the crack that runs through the pieces with exhibited in singular moments, but I think
Mm,
also it presented a really interesting shift for yourself as well. You're known for these
yeah.
really large and layered works that resemble sculptural canvases, and they're often hung on the wall. But with singular moments, you presented a series of freestanding charcoal sculptures on plinths as well. Could you tell us
Mm,
a little bit more about these four sculptures? And it's so interesting because they are such an interesting, but they do feel almost natural development from your wall-bound works. How do you make sense of the relationship between these freestanding sculptures and the wall-bound works, which many people would be familiar with?
yes. Um, So I always thought canvas should not be a limit to you, creating works in a 2D form. So this was always there with me. So I think this urged me to try 3D on the canvas as a base. So that's how my initial works are. Like, I am trying to bring connection from 2D to 3D. So from this, I believe sculptures are a natural evolution of my 3D forms. So when being detached from the canvas, I think I can create more pure and uncontaminated charcoal pieces, I think. Yeah, that's what I believe. So that's why I try these charcoal sculptures to to exhibit in its pure form.
Do you think you'll be making a lot more of these freestanding sculptures, or do you think they are something that you found incredibly interesting and would like to continue working with them?
Yeah, it was very interesting to work on a 3D, platform, because you can tend to move around, and there is a more rhythm, and there's a lot of action involved when you're doing on a 3D piece than on a canvas. So I think there's a lot of freedom to it. So I probably will be continuing the 3D works, but right now I'm in the transition period, so I'm still figuring out how to stabilize the works, how to make it stand on its own rather than having the current ones are still not that stable because the core inside the charcoal sculptures are just plywoods. So I'm thinking how to develop the idea.
Mm.
Mm,
Yeah, and I think something that struck me when I was seeing the exhibition at Gaja was I was trying to take photographs of some of the works that I was looking at, but
mm,
I couldn't really photograph them in a way that captured how multi-layered they were. And I imagine this must not just be the case for myself, but maybe your experience as well when trying to photograph some of your works, either installed or whether or not you're in your studio as well. Have you experienced difficulties in lighting or photographing your works in a way that adequately captures its textures or tones?
yeah, tell me about it. Seriously, it was really difficult and challenging every time I take, and the team from Gaja also, they find it really difficult. So we have to take multiple photographs to get the one right one. So yeah, I mean, still now I haven't cracked the code yet. I'm figuring out how to do that. But in the meanwhile, so as I said, we used to take a lot of photographs to see to get that one particular photograph that we needed. Because the charcoal itself reflects light. Therefore, I could never get the actual color, to capture the textures and the tones. Even some asked me if I had added any component to make it grayish, Uh, so yeah. Um, so and also people told me that it's very different in photo and and in upfront and close is very different. So I mean, I initially thought it's a good idea when people have to really come into the in person to exhibit. I mean, to view the works, right? So I thought it was a good idea. Okay, at least I can definitely ask the people to come over. But today, I think online, everything is online, right? Maybe not a very good idea. Um,
Yeah, but in a
yeah.
way, I also find it so interesting that, there's this emphasis on a real life encounter with, the sculptural manner in which the charcoal is kind of manipulated, the way in which you do it. And
Yeah.
also, I think photographs don't adequately capture it, but it's also interesting to me that, we're doing a podcast and describing it orally, how the
Mm,
works are
mm,
actually formed. So perhaps, it's all just different ways of representing something that maybe does not fully capture the essence or the true form of the work itself, but maybe could gesture at it to get people interested. And I'm wondering if, based on your experience and also speaking to people that have encountered your works as well,
mm.
I know you probably have heard from people that, a real life in-person encounter with the work is so different from seeing it in the
Yes.
visual as well. But
Yeah.
what are some of the things that people have told you, especially in terms of why they feel this way? Because I think, of course, the image sometimes flattens the work and the
Yes.
dimensionality of it. But what are some of
Mm-hmm.
what do people refer to when they say that the work versus the visual or the digital image just is not the same when they speak to you about this experience?
Yeah, especially the ones in this singular moments, right? The one that is named as Blotch is actually a piece that you have to see in person because uh, in an online view, right? You can never see the difference. What I actually did in that. Because the blotch is itself why I named it because because it's an eagle view, or a view high above. But then you need to get closer to actually understand the view. So there's a subtle difference in the textures, so which can only be experienced and enjoyed by looking in person, you see. So the people who really wanted to buy those artworks, right? So the collectors, they actually told me that, I don't think I can see any difference. I probably have to go down to take a look at it. So I felt really you know really challenged, not being able to capture the difference properly in an online view. So that was a bit challenging thing, and I'm trying to tackle that issue in the future. Yes.
Yeah. And I think something that I think charcoal does incredibly well is that it's a material that draws people in. It's so tactile and it's also incredibly sensuous as well. When you touch a piece of charcoal, and I think anyone who's done a barbecue would experience this, it leaves
Yeah.
these traces of darkened dust or powder on your hands. And I was wondering if, given this quality, is audience engagement something you'd like to explore in future? Maybe inviting audiences to touch the sculptures or even to hold them.
Yes. mm, Actually, my works are not very interactive, but they are mentally, but not physically. But having said that, the works are very fragile. I don't think I can afford too much physical engagement with that. Yeah, because it tends to snap. So there's also actually uh, developed my works from the early stages to now, by controlling this fragility a bit, in somewhat, I control the fragility. But however, I think you're right. I would definitely like audience to know the intense nature of the charcoal, and also to have a personal interaction with it. But I think this might be my future project. I think, but I have to keep my the towels and hand soaps ready, so that they don't yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think yes.
Yeah, maybe in an environment where touch and engagement is actively encouraged again, I suppose it
Mm,
would be different. I suppose it would be just very difficult to facilitate now, with the need for sanitizing and for
yeah.
gloves, even maybe. So,
Yes.
yeah, this definitely sounds like perhaps something for the future. But
Future.
I also
Yes.
think, just to wrap everything up, I also wanted to talk to you about your relationship to charcoal. It's
Mm,
something that we've spent a lot of time talking about throughout this whole entire conversation. And I think it's something that is very clear that it's close to your heart and something that you feel very strongly for. But I'm wondering if you're in a place where you'd like to continue pushing the limits of this material, or are you
mm,
looking at delving into different media as well at this point in your practice?
mm. I think we just got married and we are in the honeymoon period. So I think me and Chaco really enjoying each other's company for now. So don't think I'm looking for a divorce right now. So I think I might have an affair, or rendezvous with other materials perhaps, but Chaco remains my soulmate for now. Yeah.
Mahalakshmi Kannappan is a Singapore based artist well known for her monochromatic works of layered and tectonic plate like forms exploring dynamic possibilities through the material of charcoal. If you'd like to see more of Maha's work, you can visit her website at www.mahalakshmikannappan.com. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. As usual, we had a lot of fun with this conversation, and I hope you've enjoyed sitting in. You can find more articles and transcripts from these podcast episodes on our website, www.objectlessons.space. We also have a presence on all the usual social media platforms, including Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you like our work, we do have a Patreon page that you can check out as well. Mushroomed is a podcast series hosted by Object Lesson Space and produced in collaboration with the wonderful people at Singapore Community Radio. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.